The Bolts taking care of business against the Hurricanes, moving on, and the rest is history, winning back-to-back Stanley Cups. For the Canes, you can see in the 3 seasons under head coach Rod Brind'Amour what they've done. Really good regular seasons, and then coming up just short in the playoffs. Of course, Brind'Amour's first year, they lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. So the Canes trying to do what it takes to get over that hump and make it to the Stanley Cup final and try and win Lord Stanley's Cup. Are you surprised that a team that has had this much success the last couple of years, instead of making some slight tweaks, kind of went big this offseason, made some wholesale changes?
I'm not terribly surprised by that, JMO. At the end of the day, I'm really not. It might seem kind of a contradiction of terms, you know, given the way this team has evolved and improved as time has gone on. But I really think this kind of came home to roost for Don Waddell and the operations staff for the Carolina Hurricanes. You know, they disposed of a pretty good, I should say, a pretty hot team in Nashville in the first round of the postseason back this year. But the stark contrast between that playoff victory, and it was really, in my estimation, almost men among boys when Carolina gets matched up against the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Bolts knock them out in 5, really dispose of them without much difficulty at all. I think if you're general manager Don Waddell, you're kind of, you know what? Thought we had the designs to compete with the best teams in the NHL, and we learned something important, something significant with respect to that matchup versus Tampa Bay. So again, I think that's kind of the backdrop that informs how proactive this Carolina group was, in spite of, you know, a steady trend in the right direction over time.
Towards the end of the regular season and, of course, into the playoffs, we thought Alex Nedeljkovic was going to be the heir apparent in Carolina, and, you know, they had their goalie set for the future. Boy, were we wrong. All 3 goalies now different teams, and they bring in Freddie Andersen and Antti Raanta. What do you make of the goaltending tandem and where they're at right now? Are they ahead of the curve as far as where they're at goaltending-wise the last couple of years?
It remains to be seen. You know, Andersen, in that initial period of time where he is declared #1 for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he really turned in some elite-level performances, some elite-level goaltending. Very consistent, and many nights against really an onslaught, Jameson, because if you remember early on in, you know, the Babcock-Lamoriello kind of tenure, this was a roster, Toronto I'm referring to, that really struggled in their own end. And Andersen held them in the mix many nights. So the point I'm making is, if he can return to that kind of form, and I don't believe he's that far removed from that kind of form. He's had a bit of a dip just in terms of production and performance over the last year plus. But if he can return to that kind of form, I think at the end of the day, Carolina comes out ahead, given that we really didn't have a declared #1 between Reimer, Mrazek, and Nedeljkovic with that kind of 3-headed monster as part of the makeup for the Carolina Hurricanes.
We saw the subtractions. They almost didn't fit on one page. The biggest of those subtractions, though, Dougie Hamilton to the Devils. How does Carolina make up for that void now left in absence of Dougie Hamilton?
That's not an easy question to answer. That's not an easy set of boots to fill. He might leave you wanting more, perhaps, in his own end, Dougie Hamilton, for you know, a guy that kind of tips him at 6'4", 200 plus. He's not going to overpower you physically, but where you'll miss him is everything runs through him on the power play. You're seeing lots of clips with just the presence of mind he has, the awareness for people around him, and the ability to make plays, keep plays alive. He's really, really effective, very impactful on the offensive side of the blue line. So now insert into the top 4, as you subtract the Dougie Hamilton, somebody like an Ethan Bear. D'Angelo remains to be seen what he's going to be capable of going forward. That's the area of concern, or not concern, where the most question marks probably point right now at this moment in time. How does this Carolina decor compare to what you saw on ice last year for this group, and with an eye towards Don Waddell may not be done. Yeah. He may not be done. I'm not here to tell you, you know, who's out there just in terms of the potential pieces to fit into that decor, but he may not be done.
Now that we're going back to our original divisions, the Atlantic, Metro, Central, and, of course, Pacific, Does that realignment, the old to new again, does that benefit Carolina, the fact that they're getting out of that Central where they had to battle night in and night out against the likes of Tampa and Florida and just some of those tough teams? Now they're going back, and they may be the top team in this division. What do you think?
I think it really does, and this is, really the best way to evaluate this group. I think it's fair to say that Pittsburgh, Washington, and the New York Islanders across the lower part of this graphic are three teams that probably should take down 3 of the 4 top spots. When you look at the remaining spot and the teams that will contend for that spot, to me it would seem pretty straightforward that between New York, the Flyers, Columbus, very likely that Carolina finishes ahead of just about the entire rest of that field.
All right, we'll have to see. It just seems like, I guess the biggest signing that Carolina made this summer was extending Rod Brind'Amour for 3 more years, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that was the biggest piece to keeping this thing on the tracks and heading in the right direction.
Teams over time tend to mimic the identity of their coaches, especially when their coaches have forward a really impressive NHL career like Rod has. I'm with you. He gets a lot out of this roster, and he carries a lot of the tone from night to night that makes this group among the more competitive in the eastern side.
All right, so we'll have to see how it plays out in Rollywood and the Caniacs coming up in October.